My own son looked me in the eyes and said I didn't deserve a +1 to his wedding. Just like that, as if telling me the weather. His words hit me like a slap, leaving me frozen in my own kitchen while he stood there, waiting for me to simply accept it. I stared at the gold-trimmed invitation in my trembling hands. Louise Bennett, it read. Just my name. No and guest. No space for anyone beside me. My throat tightened as I looked up at Jason, my only child, standing there in his expensive suit, explaining why his own mother would sit alone. The venue has limited seating, Mom, he said with practiced patience, like he was talking to a difficult child. His eyes darted away from mine when he added, Vanessa's parents have a lot of important guests coming. I noticed how he emphasized important, as if to clarify where I stood in the hierarchy. I saw something rehearsed in his explanation, the careful way he chose his words, how he kept checking his watch. It was obvious he'd discussed this with Vanessa and her parents beforehand. They had all agreed that I didn't need someone by my side while they celebrated as a family. Ever been told you don't deserve a seat at the table? Drop a comment below. I remembered helping Jason pick out his first suit for college interviews years ago. We'd laughed in the department store dressing room, him awkwardly tugging at the sleeves while I pinned the too long pants. Now he stood before me in designer clothes I couldn't pronounce the name of, looking at me like I was an obligation to manage. That invitation sat on my kitchen counter for days. I'd walk past it and feel a little stab each time. Such a beautiful thing. Cream-colored paper with raised gold lettering announcing the union of Jason Bennett and Vanessa Harrington at the Westbrook Country Club. And there was my name, alone, the physical proof that I wasn't quite enough. When Jason was little, he'd proudly introduce me to everyone. This is my mom, he'd say, grabbing my hand with sticky fingers, pulling me forward to meet teachers, friends, or strangers at the park. Now, he carefully managed my presence in his life, like I was a slightly embarrassing secret he'd rather not explain. I remember the nights I worked 3 jobs, coming home past midnight to our tiny apartment. I'd peek into Jason's room, watching him sleep, knowing I had to be up again in 4 hours to send him to school before rushing to my first shift. Every extra dollar went into a jar labeled college fund, though back then the money barely covered application fees. Finally, I called my friend Susan, tears spilling down my face as soon as she answered. Susan, I managed to say, my son is ashamed of me. Just saying those words out loud broke something in me, and I sobbed into the phone while she listened. That little ingrate! Susan's immediate outrage was exactly what I needed. Louise, this isn't the first time he's treated you like you're optional. Remember when he forgot to invite you to his graduation dinner? Or when he moved and didn't give you his new address for a month? I found myself defending Jason out of habit. He's busy. He's building a new life. His future in-laws have certain expectations. The excuses sounded hollow even to my own ears, but they were well-worn paths in my mind after years of making them. When exactly, Susan asked sharply, did you become optional in your son's life? When did the woman who worked herself to exhaustion to put him through college become someone who doesn't deserve basic respect? Her words hung in the air between us, uncomfortable but true. I remembered meeting Vanessa for the first time at a restaurant downtown. Her perfectly manicured nails, her quick assessment of my department store dress, the way she smiled without warmth when Jason introduced me. Oh, she'd said, the famous mother. Jason's told me so much. But her eyes said she found me lacking. Then came that awful dinner with Vanessa's parents at their sprawling home. They spoke at length about family holiday traditions and summer homes while barely acknowledging my presence. When I mentioned our small Christmas traditions, they nodded politely before changing the subject, as if my memories were quaint but irrelevant. Over time, I watched Jason change around them. He adopted their speech patterns, their opinions on wine, their dismissive laughs. He became someone I barely recognized, someone who looked at me with a mixture of embarrassment and impatience, like I was a childhood toy he'd outgrown but couldn't quite discard. I'll never forget sitting at that expensive restaurant when Jason corrected the way I held my fork. Mom, he'd whispered harshly, his eyes darting toward Vanessa's father. That's not how you eat pasta. My cheeks burned as I adjusted my grip, feeling Vanessa's mother's eyes on me, her slight smile of confirmation that I didn't belong. As the wedding planning progressed, I noticed being excluded from more and more decisions. Venue tours happened without me. Cake tastings I only heard about afterward. Family celebrations where I was the afterthought, invited with a casual, "Oh, Mom, we're doing this thing Saturday if you want to come." "You should bring a date to the wedding anyway," Susan suggested over the phone, her voice lit with mischief. "Show up with some handsome man and watch their faces. They can hardly make a scene at their perfect wedding." "I could never," I told her, though something stirred inside me at the thought. I don't want to cause problems or embarrass Jason on his big day. Even as I said it, I wondered why I was still protecting someone who didn't offer me the same consideration. I thought about Michael, the man I'd met at the community center book club 3 months earlier. We'd been meeting for coffee, then dinners, then long walks through the park. A widowed professor with kind eyes and a gentle laugh who made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. Michael had this way of looking at me when I spoke. Like every word mattered. His silver-streaked hair and stylish glasses, the confident way he carried himself without trying to impress anyone. I'd catch myself smiling for hours after our meetings, feeling like a teenager again. I realized I hadn't mentioned Michael to Jason at all. Our conversations had become so surface level, so careful, that I'd never found the right moment. Or perhaps I'd been protecting this small happiness from his judgment, keeping Michael safely separate from the disappointment that colored my relationship with my son. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason about wedding rehearsal details. Friday 4 p.m. at the church, dinner after at Harrington's, Saturday morning brunch for wedding party at the club, ceremony at 3 p.m. A list of events where I was clearly an outsider, included in only the bare minimum. Have your children ever made you feel invisible? Share your experience. I met Michael for coffee that afternoon, the weight of the wedding situation heavy on my mind. He noticed immediately, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "Something's bothering you today, Louise. Want to talk about it?" The whole story spilled out of me. The invitation, Jason's dismissal, the months of feeling increasingly sidelined. Michael listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. When I finished, he shared his own complicated relationship with his children after his wife died. "They blamed me for moving on," he said, as if my life should have ended with hers. Something shifted inside me as we talked. A clarity I hadn't felt before. I saw the pattern so clearly. How I'd allowed myself to be diminished inch by inch. How I'd accepted scraps of attention with gratitude. How I'd become smaller to make room for my son's new life, believing that was what mothers were supposed to do. I thought about all the years I'd put Jason first. The promotions I'd turned down because they'd mean less time at home. The dates I'd canceled when he needed help with school projects. The trips I'd never taken because college tuition came first. Always believing that someday he'd see the sacrifices, that someday he'd value me as much as I valued him. There was the time I'd helped him move into his first apartment after college, spending the weekend unpacking boxes and stocking his kitchen while he and his friends came and went. Contrasted with him not even offering to help when I downsized to my current place, just stopping by briefly to comment on how small it was. That night, I sorted through old photographs at home. Jason at his high school graduation, proudly holding the trophy for his science project that we'd stayed up all night finishing, his smile so bright, his arm around my shoulder. When had that boy become this man who looked at me like an inconvenience? My apartment felt suddenly empty, echoing with the truth I'd been avoiding. I wasn't really part of Jason's family anymore. I was an obligation, a box to check, a childhood he was trying to distance himself from as he married into Vanessa's world of country clubs and summer homes. My phone rang, and I saw Susan's name on the screen. "Checking in on you," she said when I answered. "Have you decided what you're going to do about the wedding? Want to meet for lunch and talk about it?" I agreed, watching Susan closely as we met at our favorite cafe the next day. She'd been through her own family struggles, but she carried herself with such confidence. She never apologized for taking up space, for having opinions, for being exactly who she was. "I went to my daughter's wedding alone," Susan told me over salads. It was right after the divorce, and David made sure everyone knew it was my fault. I sat there with people whispering, feeling like I had a spotlight on me for all the wrong reasons. I wish I'd brought someone, even just a friend, she continued. Not as revenge, but as support. Someone to lean on when things got tough. Someone to remind me I wasn't just Rachel's mother, but a whole person with a life outside that role. I found myself telling Susan about Michael, how he made me laugh, how he remembered small details about stories I told, how being with him felt effortless. He's important to me, I admitted, surprised by how true it felt to say out loud. Then invite him, Susan said simply. Not to cause a scene, not to get back at Jason, but because having someone who values you by your side might make this whole thing bearable. Plus, she added with a wink, I bet Michael cleans up nice in a suit. I worried about what Michael would think if I invited him into such a complicated situation. We'd only been seeing each other for a few months. Would he think I was using him to make some point? Would the tension of the day ruin what we were slowly building? What would you have done with this wedding invitation? Tell me in the comments. I planned our next dinner carefully, choosing a quiet restaurant where we could talk without interruption. I wore the blue dress Michael had complimented before, trying to boost my courage with every detail I could control. During dinner, Michael noticed my distraction. You're a million miles away tonight, Louise, he said gently. Is it the wedding still? Have you decided what you're going to do? I took a deep breath and told him everything. How each interaction with Jason left me feeling smaller. How I dreaded sitting alone at the wedding with Vanessa's family judging me. How I was tired of being treated as an afterthought in my son's life. Michael didn't offer easy solutions or dismiss my feelings. Instead, he reached for my hand and said, That sounds incredibly painful, and also like a situation where you get to decide what feels right for you, not what makes everyone else comfortable. Did I dare ask him to come with me? To step into this messy family situation when we were still getting to know each other? I looked at his kind face and wondered if it would be too much, too soon. My phone rang the next morning, Jason calling about wedding logistics. His voice was businesslike, as if he were speaking to a vendor rather than his mother. Just confirming you got the schedule I sent. The photographer wants to know who's in which family groupings. We'll need you for the family photos right after the ceremony, he continued. Vanessa's parents want some with just them, the bride and groom, and Vanessa's siblings first. Then we'll do ones with you. The casual way he separated me from family stung sharply. I noticed how he referred to Vanessa's parents throughout the call. Mom and Dad think, and Mom and Dad want. Not Vanessa's parents, or the Harringtons. Each mom and dad felt like a tiny erasure of my place in his life, a rejection of our history together. After we hung up, I sat quietly at my kitchen table, the invitation still displayed on my counter. In that moment, I made a decision that surprised even me. Not a dramatic exit, not a confrontation, but something that felt truer to who I wanted to be. I called Susan immediately. I'm going to the wedding, I told her, and I'm going to ask Michael to come with me. Not to cause a scene, not to embarrass anyone, but because I deserve to have someone who values me by my side on a difficult day. That's my girl. Susan's approval came instantly. Dignified presence with backup. Much more powerful than either not showing up or showing up alone and miserable. They won't know what hit them. I invited Michael for coffee, my stomach fluttering with nerves. When he arrived, his warm smile steadied me. I have something important to ask you, I began, and I want you to feel completely free to say no. I explained what attending the wedding would mean. The undercurrent of family tension, the likely awkwardness, the fact that Jason didn't know about him yet. I'm not asking you to be a prop in some family drama, I assured him. I'm asking for your company because you've become important to me. This isn't about using you to make a point, I continued, watching his face carefully. It's about not wanting to feel alone at an event that's already going to be emotionally complicated. But I'll completely understand if this feels like too much. Michael was quiet for a moment, considering. I'd be honored to accompany you, Louise, he finally said. Not as a statement, but as your friend. Though, he added with a small smile, I can't promise I won't enjoy watching your son realize what he's been dismissing. Susan came over the weekend before the wedding to help me prepare. We ran through potential scenarios. Vanessa's mother's likely comments, Jason's possible reactions, seating arrangements that might try to marginalize us. For each situation, we practiced calm, dignified responses. I spent an afternoon shopping for a new dress, something I hadn't done in years. Not the expected beige or navy of an invisible mother, but a deep teal that brought out my eyes. "You look radiant," the saleswoman told me as I studied my reflection. For once, I believed it. Michael and I discussed wedding gifts, agreeing on a generous check that showed no sign of my hurt feelings. "Taking the high road doesn't mean letting them walk all over you," Michael reminded me. "It means they don't get to determine your worth or your response." 3 days before the wedding, Jason texted more schedule changes. The ceremony would now include a special candle lighting with Vanessa's parents, presenting them as the foundation of the couple's future family. Another clear message about where I stood in the new order. Were you expecting her to skip the wedding? Let me know what you thought. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect blue skies. I took extra time getting ready, applying my makeup carefully, styling my hair the way Michael had once said he liked it. My hands were steady, my breathing calm. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. Michael arrived at my apartment right on time, handsome in his charcoal suit with a teal pocket square that matched my dress. "I thought we might coordinate a bit," he said with a smile. His presence felt like armor, his quiet confidence contagious. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror one last time before we left. The woman looking back wasn't just Jason's mother, or the divorced one, or any of the small limiting labels I'd accepted. She was a whole person, accomplished, worthy, and suddenly unwilling to be diminished. During the drive to the church, I shared stories about Jason's childhood with Michael. The good memories, untainted by recent disappointments. "He was such a curious child," I told him, "always taking things apart to see how they worked. I was so proud of him." It felt important to remember the fullness of our history, not just the current pain. We arrived at the church looking like we belonged together. I noticed the immediate stir among the early guests. Curious glances, whispered questions. My back straightened as Michael placed his hand gently at my waist, guiding me through the foyer with natural ease. Jason spotted us from across the room, his expression cycling through confusion, shock, and alarm in quick succession. He excused himself from his groomsmen and made his way toward us, his stride stiff, his eyes fixed on Michael. Vanessa's mother intercepted us first, her tight smile not reaching her eyes. "Louise," she said with artificial warmth, "we weren't expecting you to bring company." Her gaze swept over Michael assessingly, clearly trying to place him in the social hierarchy she understood. I introduced Michael with perfect composure, offering his full name and mentioning he was a professor of economics at the state university. I provided no explanation for his presence, no apology, no qualification, just a simple introduction, as if his presence were the most natural thing in the world. Jason pulled me aside almost immediately, his voice low and urgent. "Mom, what are you doing? I told you we didn't have space for +1s. Who is this guy anyway? How do you even know him?" I looked my son in the eyes, my voice quiet but firm. "Michael is my partner, Jason. We've been seeing each other for several months. He's important to me, and I wanted him here today." The simplicity of the truth felt powerful after months of diminishing myself. Jason struggled visibly between anger and the need to maintain appearances. His eyes darted around at the gathering guests, clearly calculating the social cost of a scene. "You should have told me," he finally said, his voice tight. Vanessa appeared at Jason's side, her white gown rustling as she approached. Her practiced smile seemed frozen as she assessed Michael. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her hand possessively on Jason's arm. Michael stepped forward with natural grace, offering warm congratulations to the couple. "Your church is beautiful," he said. "Louise has told me so much about you both." His genuine manner and educated voice seemed to throw them off balance. Jason couldn't hide his surprise as Michael casually mentioned his recent sabbatical in Europe and his upcoming book publication. These glimpses of Michael's accomplished life, visibly shifted something in Jason's perception, confusion replacing his initial dismissal. The wedding coordinator approached our group, clipboard in hand. "We're about to begin seating guests," she announced, looking uncertainly between us. "I have Louise seated in the third row on the groom's side. You'll need to adjust the seating," I said calmly. "Michael will be sitting with me." I didn't phrase it as a question or a request, just a simple statement of fact. I felt Michael's supportive presence beside me, his quiet strength bolstering mine. Vanessa's barely concealed displeasure contrasted with her father's curious assessment of Michael. I watched him register Michael's confident bearing, his tasteful watch, his articulate comments. The social calculations playing out across his face were almost comical. As we took our seats, Michael's hand rested steadily over mine. I was acutely aware of the guests around us, the speculative glances, the whispered questions, but for the first time, I didn't feel judged and found wanting. I felt like someone who deserved her place. During the ceremony, I found myself reflecting on my journey from hurt to this newfound self-respect. Each reading about love and family took on new meaning as I considered what real family support should look like, what I would no longer accept in its place. I noticed Jason seemed distracted during the vows, his eyes occasionally finding Michael and me in the congregation. There was something different in his expression, not just annoyance at the disruption of his plans, but something that looked almost like reassessment. At the reception, Michael and I were seated at a table far from the wedding party, with distant family members and work colleagues. The physical distance couldn't diminish our presence, though. If anything, it highlighted the effort to separate us. Surprisingly, Vanessa's father approached our table during the cocktail hour, engaging Michael in conversation about economic trends. I watched their animated discussion, noting how Vanessa's mother observed from a distance, clearly puzzled by her husband's interest. Throughout the evening, I noticed other guests observing the respectful way Michael treated me, pulling out my chair, bringing me a drink, laughing genuinely at my stories. Each small courtesy underscored what had been missing in how Jason and his new family regarded me. During the formal introductions, the wedding MC announced the parents of the bride with elaborate praise, before simply noting Louise Bennett, mother of the groom, without further comment. The stark contrast hung in the air, but with Michael beside me, it didn't diminish me as it might have before. They were shaken by her response. "Would you have had the courage to do the same?" Michael smoothly deflected attention from the awkward moment by complimenting the floral arrangements to our table mates. "The bride has excellent taste," he observed. "Though, of course, Jason comes by his good eye naturally," he added, nodding toward me with a warm smile that several people noticed. When it came time for family photos, I approached with Michael at my side. The photographer looked uncertainly between us and Jason, creating a moment of tension as everyone waited to see how it would be handled. Jason hesitated, visibly struggling with how to respond. Guests lingered nearby, watching the interaction with undisguised interest. The perfect wedding narrative was developing an unplanned complication, and everyone could feel it. With calm dignity, I suggested, "We can take some photos with Michael and me, and then I'm happy to do the immediate family photos however you've planned them." My reasonable tone gave Jason no grounds for objection without seeming petty. The photographer captured several shots of Michael and me together. I was struck by how natural we looked, his arm comfortably around my waist, both of us with genuine smiles. These weren't the posed, strained expressions I'd worn in so many family photos recently. Throughout the photo session, Jason's discomfort was evident. He kept glancing at Michael and me, then at Vanessa's parents, clearly struggling with this shift in how he'd expected the day to unfold. He was seeing me through new eyes, not as his embarrassing mother, but as a woman being treated with obvious respect by an accomplished man. When the time came for the mother-son dance, I joined Jason on the dance floor. His movements were stiff, his hand barely touching my back as we moved to the music. I maintained my composure, focusing on the moment, rather than the distance between us. "I'm proud of you, Jason," I said quietly as we danced. "Your wedding is beautiful, and I wish you and Vanessa every happiness." I meant it sincerely, choosing to rise above the tension instead of using the moment to express hurt or resentment. Something complicated crossed Jason's expression. Surprise, confusion, perhaps a flicker of shame. For a moment, I glimpsed the little boy who used to run to me with skinned knees and proud accomplishments, seeking my comfort and approval in equal measure. When the dance ended, Michael met me at the edge of the dance floor with a warm smile and a glass of water. He asked how I was feeling with genuine concern, his attention fully on me despite the surrounding festivities. Jason watched this interaction from across the room, his expression unreadable. Later, Vanessa's mother approached us with a slightly condescending comment about how nice it was that I'd found someone at my age. Without missing a beat, I replied with a warm laugh, "Yes, life has a way of bringing wonderful surprises when you're open to them." My response left her with nothing to criticize. From the corner of my eye, I saw Jason watching this exchange. Something shifted in his expression as he observed our interaction, perhaps seeing for the first time how his mother handled herself with grace when expected to accept subtle diminishment. Michael and I chose the perfect moment to leave, after the cake cutting, but before things began winding down. Neither rushing out early nor lingering awkwardly late. Just a natural, dignified exit that couldn't be faulted. Our goodbyes were warm and appropriate. Congratulations again to the couple. Thank you to the hosts. Pleasant farewells to those we'd met. Every interaction was perfectly calibrated to demonstrate good manners while maintaining self-respect. In the car, the emotion I'd been containing finally surfaced. "I did it," I whispered, tears springing to my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of release, of triumph, of the strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration that comes from standing in your truth. "You were magnificent," Michael said, reaching for my hand across the console. The admiration in his eyes was genuine, untainted by the family drama he'd just witnessed. Absolutely magnificent. I realized with sudden clarity that I hadn't attended the wedding with Michael to prove anything to Jason. I'd done it to honor myself, to be the woman who expected respect rather than the mother who accepted scraps of attention with pathetic gratitude. The next morning, I woke with unexpected peace. Not the righteous anger I might have anticipated, not even satisfaction at having made a point, just a quiet certainty that I'd done what was right for me, regardless of anyone else's reaction. Susan called almost before I'd finished my coffee. "Well?" she demanded. "Give me every detail. Was Jason shocked? Did Michael charm everyone? Did Vanessa's mother do that pinched face thing she does?" I laughed, sharing the highlights with my friend who'd helped me find my courage. "The best part," I told her, "is that I don't even care anymore what they thought. I know what I'm worth now, and their opinion doesn't change that." To my surprise, I received a text from Vanessa's mother the following day. "Your friend Michael is quite knowledgeable about European economics. Edward enjoyed their conversation immensely." No mention of the unexpected +1, just this oblique acknowledgement that Michael had made an impression. A full week passed before Jason called. When I answered, I noticed immediately that his tone was different, less dismissive, more cautious. "Mom?" he began, then paused as if reconsidering his words. "I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing after the wedding." Our conversation revealed his struggle to reconcile the mother he'd been dismissing with the self-possessed woman who'd appeared at his wedding. "You seemed different," he said finally, unable to articulate exactly what had changed. I neither apologized nor gloated about bringing Michael. Instead, I maintained the same quiet dignity I'd displayed at the wedding. "It was a beautiful ceremony, Jason. Vanessa looked lovely. I hope you both enjoyed your special day." After several awkward attempts at small talk, Jason finally asked directly about Michael. "So, how long have you been seeing this guy? He seems interesting." The genuine curiosity beneath his discomfort was impossible to miss. I shared only what I was comfortable revealing, establishing the boundary that my relationship wasn't subject to Jason's approval or judgment. Michael and I met at the Community Center Book Club earlier this year. He's been a wonderful presence in my life. The call ended with tentative plans for dinner, sometime soon, a small opening that hadn't existed before. Not a dramatic reconciliation, but a tiny shift in our dynamic that acknowledged something had fundamentally changed. That evening, I reflected on how my response had altered the way Jason saw me. Not through confrontation or drama, but through quiet self-respect that was impossible to dismiss. I hadn't needed to explain my worth. I had simply embodied it. Michael and I continued seeing each other regularly, our connection deepening through shared values and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. What had begun as friendship had blossomed into something meaningful that existed entirely separately from my relationship with Jason. I reorganized my living room, taking down some photos where Jason dominated the frame and adding new ones that reflected my broader life. Friends, travels, new experiences. My world had expanded beyond motherhood, and my home now reflected that reality. Susan organized a small birthday celebration for me, something I'd often downplayed in previous years. We gathered at my favorite restaurant. Susan, Michael, 2 colleagues from work, and my neighbor Ellen. A table full of people who saw and valued me for exactly who I was. 3 months after the wedding, I hosted a dinner party at my apartment. Michael helped me cook, Susan brought wine, and to my surprise, Jason accepted the invitation. He arrived alone, without Vanessa. A choice that seemed significant though neither of us mentioned it. The evening had a tentative quality, everyone careful with their words. But by dessert, something had softened. Jason asked Michael about his work with genuine interest. He complimented the meal without the faint surprise that used to color his praise of my accomplishments. As we cleared dishes together, something Jason hadn't offered to do in years, he said quietly, "You seem happy, Mom." Not accusatory, not defensive. Just an observation that acknowledged me as a person with my own life and feelings. Did this story inspire you to stand in your worth? Share it with someone who needs to hear it. In the months that followed, I often reflected on the journey from that moment, with the wedding invitation to the woman I'd become. How something meant to exclude me had ultimately led to my liberation. How pain had transformed into strength rather than bitterness. The invitation itself now lived in a drawer, no longer displayed on my counter like a wound I couldn't stop touching. It had served its purpose, not as a formal acknowledgement of my place in Jason's life, but as the catalyst for claiming my place in my own life. My relationship with Jason would never be what it once was, and that was okay. The new dynamic had an honesty the old one lacked. He no longer pretended I was central to his life, and I no longer pretended his approval determined my worth. There was respect in that authenticity. Michael had become a steady, valued presence in my life, not a replacement for what I'd lost, but an addition to what I was building. A reminder that I was more than Jason's mother, more than my past sacrifices and disappointments. I realized that by refusing to be diminished at the wedding, I'd changed not just how others saw me, but how I saw myself. The woman who walked into that church with Michael wasn't the same one who had trembled over a wedding invitation months earlier. A year later, we attended another wedding together, Michael's colleague's daughter. I wore a burgundy dress that made me feel beautiful, my arm comfortably linked with Michael's as we entered the venue. No one questioned my right to be there or treated me as an afterthought. To my surprise, when Jason introduced me to some colleagues at a chance meeting downtown, he did so with a new respect in his voice. "My mother, Louise Bennett," he said simply, without the minimizing qualifiers that had become so familiar. A small change that signified a larger shift. Looking back, I recognized the wedding day as the moment I stopped seeking approval and started requiring respect. Not through demands or ultimatums, but through the quiet certainty that I deserved no less. That certainty had changed everything. If I could tell someone facing similar dismissal what I learned, it would be this: your response doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes dignity speaks volumes that drama never could. Sometimes simply refusing to be less than you are changes how everyone sees you. The greatest victory wasn't in proving something to Jason or impressing Vanessa's family. It was in standing firmly in my worth without needing their validation, in letting go of the desperate hope that if I just diminished myself enough, they might finally make room for me. I've learned that your worth isn't determined by those who try to diminish you. It's revealed by your courage to stand in your truth, even when that's uncomfortable. even when it means breaking patterns that have defined your relationships for years. Today, my life includes Michael, Susan, my work friends, my community activities, and yes, occasional dinners with Jason. My world is fuller and richer than when I centered it entirely around a role that was no longer valued. The invitation denial became a gift in disguise. I sometimes think about how differently things might have turned out if I'd simply accepted my assigned place at that wedding. If I'd sat alone in that third-row seat, smiling bravely while being treated as an afterthought. How that choice would have affirmed the narrative that I didn't really matter. The invitation that once felt like a slap now feels like the wake-up call I needed. The moment I finally understood that no relationship should require me to be less than I am. That loving someone doesn't mean accepting disrespect as the price of admission to their life. Sometimes being underestimated is your greatest advantage. Because when people assume you'll always bend, always accommodate, always accept less than you deserve, they're unprepared for the moment you simply, quietly stand your ground. I'm grateful now for that painful moment when Jason told me I didn't deserve a +1. Not because his behavior was acceptable, but because it forced me to decide whether I agreed with his assessment of my worth. And in that decision, I found myself again. My story didn't end with dramatic confrontation or cutting ties. It ended with something much more powerful. A woman who transformed pain into purpose rather than bitterness. Who created a life so full and rich that being valued within it became the only acceptable option.